Good afternoon, everyone, and we welcome not only councillors and council officers, but the public out there. I understand there's great public interest in this matter. We may have people viewing from as far as Staining who can tell. It's a very special meeting of the Tourism, Economy and Communities Committee to consider the call-in of Executive Decision X292020, proposed appropriation and disposal of open space land at Stanley Park Golf Course, Blackpool. I am Councillor Martin Mitchell, Chair of the committee. This is the first meeting of the Tourism, Economy and Communities Committee being held remotely. If councillors and members of the public could please be patient, there may be one or two more pauses than usual. For the purposes of the record, I will confirm that all members are present and can hear and see everyone else. First of all, Councillor Paula Badess.
Yes, I can see and I can hear everyone else. Thanks, Excellent. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Coleman.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Everything seems in order.
Okay. Councillor Jane Hugo.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can see and hear everyone.
Councillor Paul Galley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm I can see and hear everyone.
Excellent. Councillor Gerard Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear everybody.
Nice to see you, Vice Chairman. Councillor Paul Wilshaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can hear and see everyone.
Okay, I'll just explain to the public at large that we have two substitutes today. Two members have been drafted in for today and today only, but they are no less welcome nonetheless. First of all, Councillor Peter Hunter. Can't quite hear.
Peter, you're on mute.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, Chair, I can see and hear everything now.
Excellent, and I think we have touch with Councillor Adrian Hutton, don't we?
Present and correct, Chair.
Thank you very much. A few words about the arrangements for the meeting. All councillors, please keep your video on at all times so we can see you. This will assist when it comes to speaking and for viewers to know who you are. Please remember to keep your microphones on mute unless you have been invited to speak. Committee members who wish to speak, please raise your hand in the usual way. Officers, if you wish to respond to a question, please also raise your hand so that I can come to you. The procedure for the call-in is as follows. The member who called in the decision, Councillor Tony Williams, will speak first. I will then invite the Cabinet member, Councillor Mark Smith, on behalf of the decision maker, the executive, to respond. The committee can then ask questions of the decision maker, who may ask a relevant officer, in this instance, Alan Cavill, Director of Communications and Regeneration, to supply further information if necessary. The committee will debate the issue and vote on the outcome. At the end of the meeting, the committee can resolve only to either refer the decision back to the executive for reconsideration or refer the matter to the full council with, in either case, details of the committee's concerns, or take no further action on the decision, whereupon the decision will come into force and may be implemented immediately. It should be noted that if the matter is referred to council, then council will only have the option of taking no further action, whereupon the decision will come into force and may be implemented immediately, or refer the decision back to the executive for reconsideration, unless it is proven that the executive acted contrary to the budget and policy framework. First of all, may I ask, are there any declarations of interest on this matter? And I see no hands. Okay, without further ado, I shall invite Councillor Williams to present his calling request. Councillor Tony Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak today in regard to a situation which has attracted a great deal of local concern. I refer to my calling request and the reasons outlined in that document. These reasons and concerns come from the many contacts I've received and met with from both users of the golf course, a great deal of local residents, and important business people and ambassadors of the town. There is a great deal of criticism in regard to the consultation process, which has been raised previously in regard to other decisions made by the executive and the council. The council have clearly stated that whilst they do have to instigate a consultation, they are in fact in no way obliged to act on any of the feedback received and can in fact simply ignore responses. The consultation was the very bare minimum required, Appropriation normally would be small, insignificant pieces of land that had otherwise been forgotten, such as wasteland, grass verges, etc. Access to the information was difficult, and it was buried deep on the council's website. A representative, who was a colleague of mine, was contacted and asked if he could find it, and he couldn't. He looked on the website and he couldn't find it. As far as I'm aware, and according to public records, no consultation was made with the NHS in regard to having this type of development adjacent to their cardiac wards. And from experience, I can tell you that peace and quiet is essential in this unit. This has created a great deal of mistrust in the council's pledge to ask the people. It's also considered that the consultation document that was presented was short on detail, especially in regard to why the council considered that the statutory criteria had been met. Therefore, consultees could not provide a meaningful response. I'm sure the council will argue that the consultation document was perfectly balanced. However, this criticism was one of the highest received across those I engaged with. There are questions as to why this parcel of land is now considered to be a recognised development area, when there's no reference to this at all in the Blackpool Town Plan. However, it is referenced in the Blackpool Green and Blue Strategy as being green space. It was initially reported that the council had received 400 objections to the development of this land, which they state would only be relevant, if at all, at the planning stage. However, as the report points out, one of the things the council needs to decide now is whether the disposal is necessary for purposes connected with the proper planning of the area. Therefore, the fact that something will be relevant to a planning application does not mean it cannot be relevant now. In fact, I would expect there to be a significant overlap in terms of the considerations relevant to both these decisions. The report effectively appears to advise the council to decide that the land is not required for its current purposes and is required for development, which is necessary for the proper planning of the area. Yet there is no reference to this requirement in any previous council plan. I think it important to point out, Chair, that I do understand the diminishing impact on golf nationally, and that several golf clubs are struggling to attract new members and cover costs. I'd also like to confirm with you, Chair, that this is not a politically motivated calling. There are no politics in this whatsoever. I recognise this is a prime piece of land, and it's established that an 18-hole course may not be viable, then just what are the options for one of the largest pieces of open space in the town? What other ideas have we been offered? I find it difficult to believe that the other bidders have not come forward with options other than the single choice we have been given. I understand that a dry ski operator would be interested. It could be a site for luxury homes. The government are looking at sites for new hospitals. If that was the option, Blackpool could become the centre of medical excellence in the UK. I'm sure members will also recognise their own potential more lucrative alternatives that are possible. The area size of this appropriation is bigger than most anything else that has happened in Blackpool's history. We have to get it right. This land and its future is of extreme local importance. I hope the committee will agree that this is far too big a decision and responsibility to be burdened and carried by a small executive. And I respectfully request that the decision be referred to full council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. I'm going to allow questions here, but it's important we don't get into the debate at this stage because we are still to hear the other side of the argument. Councillor Williams' presentation to me was very clear indeed. I don't have any questions, but I just wonder if any of the committee members have anything they didn't quite understand, anything they think needs clearing up. Councillor Galley there. There's a question.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Williams, you mentioned something about the cardiac ward, sorry, at Blackpool Victoria. Did you, if as I understood it, did you say that they hadn't been consulted?
Councillor Galley, I actually asked the Chief Exec and Mr. Cavill today if any dialogue had gone on with the council, with the hospital and the zoo in regard to them having some pieces of land. They said that they hadn't, and that it would be down to HIP to do that. I am not aware, and there's nothing in public records, that the hospital has had formal consultation with the council in regard to this development. I spoke to a Mr. Jim Maguire, who is newly appointed trustee of the trust, I believe. And he, at that time, which is 2-3 weeks ago, had no knowledge of this development. I believe he did say his colleagues had, but there is no documentation which states that the hospital have been in dialogue or consultation with the council on this development.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hutton, you had your
Chair.
hand up there.
Yeah, can I ask Councillor Williams, from what he said, and he said it previously as well, he'd be quite happy from what he's just said if this land was to go to the hospital or on luxury homes. Is he actually saying that he doesn't mind, you know, the land actually going? He's just objecting to what it's actually going for.
I'm going to have to intervene here. I think it's important we don't get into the nitty-gritty at this stage. Councillor Williams doesn't actually have a response. I heard the question, Councillor. Councillor Williams doesn't have a responsibility to set out an alternative plan. That's not his responsibility.
I'm happy to answer, Chair, if you allow.
No, I thank you, Councillor Williams, but I don't think that's a question that has to be answered at this stage.
Well,
okay, I'm looking at any other hands that might be there. Okay, if not, we go on to the next stage of the process. And Councillor Mark Smith, would you like to respond on behalf of the executive?
Thank you, Chair. I'm confused by the points Councillor Williams has raised in respect of this decision. However, I will try and take the time to point out one by one his raised concerns. The statutory consultation period of 2 weeks was carried out and was completed before lockdown, where COVID-19 affected us. This process of appropriation is not, the appropriation process is a planning issue, not a planning issue. We must only consider if the land in question could be better used and not the detail of the use. To do this, as Councillor Williams knows, would be to preempt a planning decision. He is surely not asking us to do that, as it would not only be contrary to planning law, but it would also be unfair to all concerns, whether they are opposed or any scheme that's proposer of the scheme. Also, on the qualities issue you raised, these can surely only be considered once we know the details of any development. And as the appropriation process does not consider the details of the development, that is the planning matter, as we stated earlier, then there is nothing to judge the qualities criteria against. I would ask the committee to dismiss the request on clear grounds that Councillor Williams' issues are quite clearly not related to the decision, but to a future planning one, which we must be careful not to consider here today, as that would be contrary to planning law. I would be happy to answer any questions that the committee have, but I would respectfully ask that we not get drawn into the debate on the merits of the proposal that has not yet been considered for planning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. I've got some questions myself, and I had one prepared earlier, but you've maybe answered it, but I'll address it to you again just to make sure there's no mistake. As I understand it, you confine yourself, when considering us on the executive, to non-planning issues. So if anything was a planning issue, was likely to be considered later on, you didn't consider it at the executive stage. Is that correct, Councillor Smith?
No, we don't consider plan issues at the executive. No, that stands the planning committee.
Yeah. Well, you see, in Councillor Williams' written submission, he's arguing that there are issues which may be planning issues, but they also may be issues of general interest. I know it's in 5.15 to report to the executive, and this seemed to me very important. a reason for appropriation, and it seemed to me the reason, I quote, that the development is likely to contribute to the achievement of the promotion of improvement of the economic, social, and/or environmental well-being of the area. Now, that seems to me a kind of slightly long-winded way of saying it's for the good of the town. Yeah. And there are a number of issues which people may think are important, and I'll read them out to you. You don't have to answer every one, but I'm just interested in whether you consider them or not. Traffic, highways, parking, wildlife, ecology, destruction of natural habits, conservation, impact on Blackpool Victoria Hospital, environmental issues, heritage, tourism, loss of trees, the procurement process and the risk with the developer, flood risk, alternative proposals for the site, and there's a category called other reasons, which includes local people might not use the development. Because in the written report that was in front of you when you took the decision on the executive, the same phrase was repeated in conjunction with each of those categories, and it was, the issues raised are not relevant because they do not directly relate to the matters that the council is required to consider. So if you just could confirm with me, Councillor Smith, is that right? You didn't consider these reasons because you thought they were planning issues, not issues for the executive?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the preparation of the land, in my layman terms, is changing the covenant use of the land. Currently, the land is down for recreational and leisure use as a golf course. And over the years, it's been struggling as a golf course. Now we're looking to change the covenant use of the land to put it into planning use for future development. So that part of this report, this executive decision, is just to change the use of the land.
Yeah, I just want to be absolutely clear. I mean, conservation, for example, is obviously really, really important, and if it gets to planning, it will be considered at that stage.
Anything to do,
yeah, your attitude was we won't consider it at this stage because it will be addressed.
It'll be decided.
Planning. Is that
yes, any development on that site will be considered through the planning committee, not through the executive committee.
Yeah, and I've mentioned this already, but Councillor Williams is arguing that there's an overlap between planning considerations and considerations that are also considerations of general interest. So they're both. They're interested. Yeah. So,
with that, can I bring in Alan Cavill, because the officer regarding this, he knows a bit more about planning and overlap and decision process. So can I ask Alan to comment on that?
Would you like to comment, Mr. Cavill?
Happy to, Chair, if you're willing to let me.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I suppose it might be easier for members to think about this in a slightly different way. The appropriation of land, as Councillor Smith has suggested, is about changing its use, not about adding a specific development. So when you read out the bit that said that the development may be to the benefit of the locality, that means the development of the land, not a specific development. So if that development was, for example, housing or whatever, that would be considered on its merits of planning. This is a question of whether or not this piece of land should remain as open space or should be put into the planning system to allow it to be developed in some other way. If this process was done differently, it doesn't have to be done like this, but it perhaps would be more normal, then the appropriation would have been done before the procurement process. So the council would have said, right, this 18-hole golf course is no longer functioning as a golf course. We want to see if we can find some better use for it, and therefore we're going to appropriate it from its open space use, which is actually, if you like, no planning use. So it's not in the local plan, as has been pointed out, to appropriate it into planning, so as it can be considered for planning. And that's what appropriation is. It isn't. It absolutely is not a consideration of a particular development, but whether the land should be developed at all. Therefore, all of the issues that have been raised about environment or habitats or any of the other things you've mentioned are going to be determined by whatever that development actually is, as opposed to whether or not a development takes place.
I understand. I'm just double checking. I've probably triple checked or quadruple checked, but the position taken by the executive is that they didn't have to consider those things because
Well, not only did they not consider them, they couldn't. It would be ultra vires for them to consider them, because the process of planning is a much more complicated one, and quite rightly so, that allows people to object and to appeal and to do all sorts of things that this process simply does not allow. It's not.
Okay,
it's not part of that process.
I'm not a spokesperson for the council, but I tried to reflect his view. I think his position was not that it should be considered in the way the planning committee should consider it, but the executive should look at it in principle. Was it a good idea, without considering the minutiae of planning considerations? I think that's the point he was making.
I do understand the point, but I suppose the point is, if the executive had decided, for example, that I've looked at this project and I do think it's a good idea, and therefore I'm going to do the appropriation, then the executive has taken a view on that particular development prior to a planning decision. So it's preempted a planning decision, which it's not allowed to do.
It's not allowed to do.
No.
I would have thought the executive could take a decision in principle, subject to planning permission. You're saying you can't?
No, well, because it's the council. The council is a body corporate, and the council body corporate takes decisions on planning, and it takes decisions on all sorts of things. But if the executive said this is a brilliant scheme, and it must go ahead, as described in a document that's got nothing to do with this appropriation, it is preempting a planning decision.
Okay, I see Councillor Williams has a hand raised, but I think there were one or two other hands raised by committee members. I think Councillor Walsh, did you have your hand raised there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just in relationship to this, the planning stage and what's deemed as general interest. If I can, I'll just give you 3 examples of why it should be taken into consideration, especially initially at the petition stage. If I could give members 5.33, one of the issues that are raised, it's not a planning issue, it's just a specific general interest. So the areas of Blackpool in greater need of investment and regeneration. Now, over the last year, we've had properties collapsing on Coronation Street. We've had properties in the last 2 months collapsing on Central Drive. One collapsed on Bond Street the other day. So it's right for people of Blackpool to ask the question, are there other places that could be looked at for redevelopment and investment? So, but that was never given to the executive, that was never given to the council to discuss because the petition was rejected. If I could also bring you to the point of 5.4.
Councillor Walsh, I don't want to interrupt too much, but you are giving up to a question, are you? I mean, I hope you.
Yeah, my question is, I was going to read another 2 examples, clear examples. One was about 5.45. There are too many tourist accommodations in Blackpool. 250 lodges proposed to be built. At one time, we were told there's too many bed spaces in Blackpool. They changed the narrative then to it's a free market and the free market will decide what a successful business comes to. My point is, these aren't planning decisions that are spoken about at this stage, or the stage when it should have been, when Blackpool Council or the administration should have accepted the petition. These are conversations that should have been had beforehand. Unfortunately now, this document has been produced, and with the caveat or an observation of the officer's comments, it's not viable or for dispose of council-owned land. No one can discuss it. We're not allowed to have that conversation now. So if we're not allowed to have that conversation now about these key areas, when are we allowed to have that conversation? Because the sale of the land will have already gone. It's not a planning issue. I accept that. But when do we have this conversation? Thank you, Chair.
I think Councillor Smith may think he's already answered that question. He may indicate, I think Councillor Smith and Mr. Cavill argued it was ultra vires. They couldn't look at that. They weren't allowed to look at it. That seems to be the argument. And I don't see them indicating anything different.
Because they rejected the petition.
Councillor Kelly has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have several, if I may. I don't quite know where to start. Really. I guess I'll try and take it straight from Councillor Williams' question first, and then I'll come in with my own. If this is for Councillor Smith. In terms of this, the NHS dialogue, could you answer that question that the hospital hadn't had any dialogue about the land?
So, Councillor Smith. Yep. Can I come in there, Chair? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
When everybody in Blackpool had the chance to respectfully comment on the development because it went to consultation. So they had the opportunity to consult them if they wanted to, you know.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Cavill had his hand up as well. Would you like to add anything, Mr. Cavill?
I can. Just to be clear, I mean, Councillor Williams did email me today, and I gave him a response, which was that we weren't aware of discussions having taken place between HIP and the hospital or the zoo at this stage. But the hospital, both the hospital and the zoo, actually submitted a bid for this land as part of the procurement process. So they were fully aware of the process and of the potential development all the way through that procurement process. And following Councillor Williams' helpful email to us about I forgot the name of the chap in question, who was new to the hospital and therefore didn't know about the development. You're quite right, but other people in the hospital did know about the development. So there's no question in my mind that the hospital was fully aware of both the appropriation and HIP's proposals, both two separate things. But in terms of have they had a discussion about disposal of land directly from HIP? No, I'm not sure that that's happened yet.
Okay, because if I may, Chair, because that's actually really important in terms of the key part of the calling request, which is about the nature of the consultation and the fact that we had COVID. When you look at this in 5.11, it says that any representations in respect to the proposal to dispose of the open space land should be received by the council no later than 5 p.m. on 19th of March. Now, if we roll back to what that week looked like, I know from things that I was involved with, I had no time at all to deal with anything else than survival. So I was thinking about, what are we going to do about COVID? What are we going to do about managing this particular crisis, this particular pandemic? I'm pretty certain that's where a large amount of not only the people of Blackpool were as well, but also the hospital themselves in terms of their priority. So in terms of Councillor Williams' point, I think that's really, really significant that this wasn't a normal time, this wasn't an ordinary time, and that I believe it should be considered again, given the opportunity that we are now moving back out of lockdown and into more normal times, that actually the people therefore can have due consideration to have more time to consider the facts and participate in and have their views represented into the scheme. Now, the other thing that concerns me as well, which is why I think it should go to full council, is concerning the priority. Now, this is in terms of was it 4.1? The relevant council priority is the economy, maximising growth and opportunity across Blackpool. I actually think that's a direct contradiction against priority 2 of the council, which is communities, creating stronger communities and increasing resilience. So my question for Councillor Smith is, does this scheme not undermine priority 2?
Well, there were two questions. I mean, there was a question about COVID that you asked beforehand.
Yeah.
And I don't think you were alleging a conspiracy, were you? But nevertheless,
no. It was just terrible timing. It was a nightmare, wasn't it? It was horrible.
Bad.
Yeah.
That has been quite an extensive response, but who knows? It may have been even more extensive, as it quite likely would have been. Would you like to address those points, Councillor Smith?
Yeah, the first point, Chair, regarding the date of the 19th of March. First of all, it went out to publication on the 27th of March, so that was weeks before the heat of the pandemic started to hit. So there's opportunity for, if I remember correct, I don't know, Alan informed me earlier that people also, we didn't close the doors on the 19th, so anybody put a comments forward after that date, we still accepted them, so for a bit of time. So, but I think there's ample time for that. So, okay, the news media or lockdown started around about the 19th, but it's 2 weeks prior to that.
It didn't. Whoa! It so didn't. Crikey, we were shut. New Zealand closed down on the Monday of that week. If you check your diary on that week, Councillor Smith, the world was shutting down. And anybody who was at that point in any professional or senior role did not have the time to be looking at consultations as regards planning or relevant types of issues as regards this particular land. They were busy trying to save their business or totally re-engineer it.
Okay, I take your point there, Gary. I'm just trying to put on dates. A lot of times happened since that moment in time, that date I can't recall. But we had 288 people who still commented on the development. So there's a large number of people have come to us regarding that. So just your comments there. Can you refresh the second question, please?
Yeah.
Yes, this is being only classed as priority 1 in terms of the council's priorities, and that actually undermines priority 2.
Can you clarify why it undermines it first?
Absolutely. Creating stronger communities and increasing resilience. So creating stronger communities and increasing resilience is often we use green spaces to achieve that. This scheme will actually undermine that ability because people won't have access to any potential opportunity to access that land.
I mean, saying that, right next door to the proposed site is one of the world famous or UK famous or English famous parks, Stanley Park, so there's lots of space where people can go to enjoy open space on the other side of the road. So there is a lot of green space which people can, residents of Blackpool, enjoy. The site at the moment is actually quite a manicured flat golf course, which is appreciated by golfers mainly. It's not generally used for the public for walking across. So we had to open the site, it would probably develop the site and have a bit more access for people to enjoy.
Okay, sorry, Chair.
Finished. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just the final one from me is my genuine concern is that because of the nature of this proposal, this scheme is so huge and so vast, Chair. There was already a concern about it undermining our green and blue strategy. As I say, I have a concern that it's undermining our own priority too. And as a councillor, and this references Councillor Walsh's point, I've had absolute no involvement in this scheme at all, no opportunity to suggest alternative options. Now, when I watched the executive discussion on this matter from week last Monday, it was discussed in terms of that, well, there are no other options and so on for it, and that clearly had an influence on the decision by the executive members. And my concern is that we are letting a small number of councillors make a huge decision on a strategic piece of land that undermines public trust in not only the council but us as councillors. And therefore, I am absolutely convinced that all councillors should have this say and this conversation. And if it hadn't been for Councillor Williams today bringing this in as a call-in, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. And it would just be then restricted then when we got to planning that, oh, well, we can only now discuss planning options. So the question for me, or really, Chair, is that we've seen a complete lack of involvement of elected members in this proposal.
Yeah, I guess the answer will be that the planning issues can be sort of considered further down the line. For example, the green-blue planning can be considered at a later stage. I don't have any indications in front of me, apart from Councillor Williams. I have seen you. I was going to leave you to the end. Oh, Councillor Hugo has a question there. Yes.
Thank you. Just unmuting. Thanks. I've got two questions, but I just wanted to check something that Councillor Galley said. Councillor Galley, please, could you just confirm when you...
Okay, I'll I'll allow the question. I won't necessarily allow them to answer it because
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just wanted confirmation of the date that you said lockdown started. I can't remember what date he actually gave a few minutes earlier.
If this is going to be like a procedural matter about what date it started, I think we can Google it on the internet and find out.
Well, exactly. I have just Googled it and I wanted to check whether it
was
confirmed.
referencing New Zealand, Chair.
Yeah, it's sort of
Okay.
slightly
Beginning of
different
the week.
definitions
Okay.
depending where you live. And your
If it helps anybody, Chair, I was stuck in Spain on the 14th of March. Had to get a rescue flight, so that helped.
Doesn't help at all, Councillor Walsh. No.
Well,
and your next point, Councillor Hugo.
Just to clarify my first point, please, Chair, the UK lockdown, and we live in the UK, was the 23rd of March. I've just done a fact check on that, so I just wanted to clarify that point as fact. Thank you. My first question is when Mr. Cavill was explaining earlier the procedure, he mentioned that normally the procurement process would come after the agreement of the appropriation of the land, and I just wonder why that process wasn't followed in this instance.
I'll allow Mr. Cavill through Councillor Smith if he wishes to.
Yeah, if Alan can answer that question on my behalf. Yes.
Sorry if what I said confused anybody. What I said is it could have happened the other way around. I suppose it should have happened the other way around. It's a bit chicken and egg sometimes to sort of figure out whether or not there is any interest in a piece of land before you decide to appropriate it, or you've decided that piece of land is no longer serving a useful purpose, so you appropriate it and then procure. So you can either try and establish that there is a demand and therefore you do the appropriation, or you may do the appropriation and then try and figure out whether there's any demand. So there isn't a fixed way of doing it. I was trying to use it as to try and help. It's complicated to me to help people to understand that the appropriation is a completely separate process from what actually happens on the site in the end.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. And my last question.
Well, no, that's very interesting, Councillor Hugo. Sometimes what happens is that there's an invitation for expressions of interest, and then there's perhaps some public discussion, and then there's a formal tendering process later. That's another way of doing it. I just wondered if that occurred to either Councillor Smith or Mr. Cavill. That might be another way of doing this.
Well, sorry, Chair, if I can answer, yes. I mean, I guess that's a reasonable way in which it could have been done, but it wasn't done that way. It was done this way, and we are where we are.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hugo, and your next question.
Thank you. Yeah, so my last question, it was just really, I think I've understood this correctly, so I'm just looking for confirmation, really. So, am I right in thinking that if the appropriation of the land is granted, HIP will then be able to own that land, and then it's up to HIP to put in planning proposals to the planning committee, which then need to get granted for whatever purpose. So it could be for the idea that we're all aware of, or it could, if that doesn't go through planning, they would have to think up a different idea of what they want to do on the land. At each stage, that would have to go to planning.
I can answer that. They won't buy the land until they get planning permission. That's the way it will work. So they're not actually buying it, they're taking out a long-term lease, but no, they won't take possession of the lease until they get the planning permission. That's the way you find it will work. Does that? Do you trust me to answer that question, or would you like?
Do we get Alan just to clarify that for us?
Absolutely, Mr. Cavill.
Sorry. There's a series of decisions here, and we're all very focused on the appropriation, which is the bit that changes the designation, if you like, from public open space to one that can be considered a planning. And Councillor Hugo's absolutely correct. That appropriation could result in any development following the appropriation. However, I'm sorry, the other two decisions relate to the disposal of the land. So at the moment, we have leased the golf course to HIP on a short-term basis, and Councillor Mitchell's absolutely correct, the Chair's absolutely correct, that I would not imagine that a HIP would take a long-term lease on the, what I think we call, and I get confused about which side is which, but anyway, the east side of the site. would not take a long-term lease on it, and if they didn't get the planning permission they were looking for. But the appropriation allows any development to take place subject to planning.
Okay, Councillor Hugo, next question.
Thank you. It's just in response to that, really. So the appropriation of the land takes place. HIP have got the lease on it currently. HIP say put the planning application in for their idea, which we're all aware of. It doesn't get through planning. That land can then still be sold to another party, like Councillor Tony Williams referred to earlier. So the hospital could still have the opportunity to buy it if planning isn't passed on the idea that HIP are keen on. In a nutshell, is that right? Yeah.
That's a theoretical possibility, and Mr. Cavill's nodding away there.
Thank you. That's me. Thank you.
Well, very, very good questions, Councillor Hugo. Thank you very much. And last but not least, I'm sorry, Councillor Williams, I have to wait a while longer. Councillor Gary Coleman, you have a question, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Chair. Thank you very much. I've got probably 3 questions, but shall we do them one by one?
Yes.
Can I ask Councillor Smith, was attention paid to our open space audit? I know Councillor Smith mentions that we have Stanley Park, and obviously we're all very proud of Stanley Park. But as we're probably all aware, there's only 6 other boroughs within the country that has less green space than Blackpool at the present time. And our open space audit basically states over a quarter of our green space is in the Stanley Park area and the surrounding area. And it says, basically, existing open space and land should not be built on unless it is clear that the land is surplus to requirements. The loss of land would be replaced by larger and better provision elsewhere. And finally, there is a demonstrable need for alternative sports provision that outweighs the loss of such valuable land. Did Councillor Smith pay attention to this audit and the Cabinet before they made the decision, Chair? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Smith, was that something you considered?
I mean, yes, sorry, Chair and Councillor Coleman, regarding that, sorry, excuse me there a second. What we're doing, the progress of the land is really release the land for development in the future. So it could be many uses. If this, whatever happens, the land will always be around for development for any future development. But currently, there is an option on the table for somebody to use that land for that use. With that, there's going to be there will always be part of the process within the planning process to ensure we have plenty of green space within that, which is available for people to use. So, but also, as I said earlier on, we do have a world-class sort of park on our doorstep as well. So I'm just thinking, yes, these things were considered, but we do have other facilities within the town as well that people can enjoy.
Yeah, okay. Your next question, Councillor Coleman.
Yeah, obliged, Chair. Thank you. Can I ask, was consideration taken of obviously the climate emergency that we agreed as a council in June 2019, and specifically, if I may quote again, ensure that every aspect of the council's activities are cited on the need to preserve Blackpool's ecological and environmental heritage? Was that taken into account as well, please, Chair?
Councillor Smith, did he take that into account?
All items what the council want to do to improve our screening strategy and its climate emergency are also considered in what we want to do to improve and make Blackpool better for the future. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you. It's already been referred to when the petition came to council. I believe it was Councillor Campbell to quote, and this was before the vote actually took place. We are now duty bound to work with Homes Investment, and that was mentioned before we actually took the vote. Were we actually duty bound to work with Homes Investment before we took the vote, or should that sort of quote have waited till afterwards? And are we now duty bound still to work with Homes Investment? Thank you.
Councillor Smith, first of all, but I see Mr. Cavill.
I'll try and answer that question, but I might bring Alan in to clarify that. Can I just refer back to the document that it's the appropriation of a land, not the development on the land. So all we're doing here is, say, taking the blue line around the piece of land and putting a red line for use within sort of for use for planning. So whatever happens would be at a later stage. So all we're doing here with that question really is irrelevant to this question, this document, because all we're talking today is regarding the appropriation of the land, changing the covenant use of the land to be used for development use.
Yeah.
Valerie wants to add anything to that, he's welcome to.
Councillor Coleman's suggestion is that on the basis of the quote from Councillor Campbell that you had your hands tied already. That's what he was suggesting. Or she is supposed to have given that impression. I'll allow Mr. Cavill to come in.
Thank you. I think, Councillor Coleman, if I can try and put that into context, the debate at the time was talking about whether or not another bidder could be considered over Homes Investment. Homes Investment had actually won that bidding process, and therefore we were duty bound to work with them in that process, as opposed to anybody else, because nobody else won that process. Now, that does not mean that the appropriation had to happen, or that this development has to happen, or that planning has to be agreed. It was simply saying within that procurement process, there was only one winner, and there was, and that was Homes Investment Properties.
Okay, that's clear to me. Had you any more questions, Councillor Coleman?
Yeah, just two, thank you, Chair, and then I've extinguished my questions, thank you. At the executive meeting a few days ago, Councillor Benson basically quoted the area that's being sold, or the area that's for appropriation, is, to quote, a vast space that the majority of people in Blackpool have never been on. So we are not going to be taking anything away. I just worry that if that was the consideration of the Cabinet, you know, I've never been to the Amazon rainforest, but it still impacts on us even if you haven't been there. It just worries me if that was the way of thinking of the Cabinet. That anyway, I don't know whether that's a question actually, Chair, but if we could ask Councillor Smith while he's here.
You have the chance to respond if you wish, Councillor Smith.
It feels like a bit of a comment there, you know, from another executive member. I don't think I can add anything to that, to be honest, Chair.
Okay, yeah. And your last question, Councillor Coleman.
Yeah, I appreciate your patience with me. Thank you, Chair. And the question is on the blue and green infrastructure strategy. And again, I quote from it. The remit of the Council's blue and green strategy is not to safeguard every green space in Blackpool from development, but secure quality green space, which has been quoted, obviously, in the paperwork that we have today. So may I ask, at what point do we stop disposing of our green space? You know, if the golf course that will be left, the 9-hole course, if it does go ahead, if that starts to fail, will we start looking at selling that area of green space at Stanley Park and any other areas of green space? I just wondered, where's the line in the sand? Thank you, Chair.
Well, Councillor Smith, presumably you thought this wasn't the place to draw the line in the sand. Is that correct?
Well, we're talking about the now, at the moment, not the future. We're talking about this piece of land which is in front of us, which is the east side of the Stanley Park, of the golf course. So we're talking about this piece of land currently at this moment in time that we feel we need to release for future development. I can't talk about what could happen in 5, 10 or 20 years. We're just talking about today.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Councillor Coleman. And Councillor Walsh asking for a second bite of the cherry there.
It was just a follow on.
Okay, very quickly, Councillor Walsh.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I was following on from Councillor Hugo's point, and it was, but unfortunately, Councillor Coleman came on there. I just wanted to ask Mr. Cavill or Councillor Smith, why would HIP lease the land if they didn't already think planning would go through?
Well, I mean, I don't think that's necessary. I think they must have assumed there was a reasonable possibility that the planning permission would be given. I don't think we need an answer from Mr. Cavill, but he wants to say something anyway, Mr. Cavill.
They've leased the land because they're running the golf course.
Oh, there you are. Okay, be very patient there in the corner. Councillor Tony Williams, who instigated this procedure in the first place. I can see he's dying to ask at least 1 or 2 questions of Councillor Martin.
I thought it might be relevant, Chair. I was the portfolio holder when Mac Trading took over the golf course. It's always been in the council's remit to get rid of the golf course. It's never been a popular addition to what we were trying to do. But the reason why this has now been appropriated isn't because the council have decided that, oh, we've got a spare piece of land, we could do something with it. The truth is that David Lloyd recognised this spot. He chose it, or David Lloyd's company chose it from a map. This is long before a consideration of appropriation was made at all. And along with that choice, HIP became involved. So there was obviously some discussion or dialogue before even the tendering process or the bidding process went out. As I stated before, Chair, this was not in the Blackpool plan. There was no consideration at all during the time I was portfolio holder, and I know since subsequent conversations with Mr. Blackledge, to dispose of this land. Okay. We were looking for someone to run the golf, but not dispose of the land. It's all intrinsically linked. HIP are actually conducting a scoping document, and they've started to do this. The scoping document will probably give them some time and ideas of what the planning committee will want. They've done this before the lease was signed.
Okay, yeah, well, you're making a very, very strong suggestion there, Councillor Williams. I'm not sure it was a question. There's absolutely no necessity for anybody to respond to that if they don't want to respond.
I can't understand why I need to. No, Chair. So
there's no response to that. Yeah. Okay. Right. Moving on to the debate here, and it'll be strictly one contribution per member. So try and gather your thoughts as best as possible. Trying to sum up your views on the matter, and please be aware that it will be your one shot. Okay. So thank you very much for answering, Councillor Williams earlier, and Councillor Mark Smith and Mr. Cavill, who would like to contribute to the debate here.
Sorry, Chair, I'm a bit confused on this bit, the process at the moment. Sorry.
Well, we've exhausted the questioning. So I'm thanking you for taking part in the meeting. The members want to have a debate before coming to some conclusion. Okay.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Does that mean we leave do we leave the room while they debate?
There's no necessity for you to leave.
All right.
You're likely to be called again.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So I'm looking forward to who might. I see one of our guest members this afternoon, Councillor Adrian Hutton. Would you like to start the debate, Councillor?
Chair, I'm a little bit confused over this, not least because I've sat on the planning committee. I've never been on a call-in like this, but I actually know the difference between what we're being asked to do tonight and what the planning issues are. People seem to have got this rather confused. The executive can't discuss any of the planning issues that might relate to this. So whatever it is, all of the planning issues, the green space, all the habitat issues and all of that will only come up when we start discussing the planning issue, which is why certain members aren't here tonight, because they're actually involved with the planning committee. They can't be involved in this and the planning committee. That's a point that people need to understand, that these are two very separate issues. And I'm surprised that some people seem to have got them very confused. And it struck me that during this debate, there's an awful lot of people who seem to think that this piece of land that we're talking about is used by thousands of people. Well, I can tell you, I walk round past that piece of land on a very regular basis. And the number of people that I've seen on it up until COVID started the reduction in the lockdown was virtually nil. You could walk past that piece of land nearly any time of the day and that you would not see anybody playing golf on there. There are a few people playing golf on there at the moment, and I think that's so they can catch up on their golfing handicap. And it struck me also that it seems as if, from what Mr. Councillor Williams was saying, that if this was going for certain other uses, it wouldn't be an issue. He seems to be quite happy to, if this was going to the hospital. And he actually mentioned that if this was going for luxury homes, well, sorry, Councillor Williams, but we don't need any more luxury homes in Blackpool. We need some ordinary homes for working class people. This isn't what we're talking about. This is purely and simply a leisure development, which will actually open up this piece of land for more people to use. There are a lot of open spaces around there where if you go round there any time of the day or night, well, no, maybe not the night, but during the day, there's an awful lot of people that are using the other areas around there. Lawson's Field, if you go onto that, that's one of the best walking spaces for dogs. Round the back of the golf courses, round the back of the village golf course, there's a very nice footpath and a bridleway, which a lot of people use. So don't come out and say that we're taking away from the residents of Blackpool their walking space and their leisure areas, because this golf course has never been open to the general public. And that's a fact. So all these people that are suddenly coming out of the woodwork saying that we're depriving them of their leisure space, I'm sorry, but that isn't correct. It's a very small minority of people that are using a very large area to play golf on. And there are other golf courses around there. And as was pointed out previously, and this has been debated on a number of occasions, or talked about on a number of occasions, we're one of the very few areas where there are public 18-hole golf courses. Even the village, if I'm correct, is only a 9-hole. I could be wrong on that, but as I don't play golf. But I've been in a lot of other places, and there are very few 18-hole public golf courses. They're nearly all 9-hole. I'll leave it at that, Chair. It just strikes me that we're getting bogged down in something that we should have dealt with, got on with, get it through, and then let's go on to the planning issues and see what we can put on there that will benefit and bring in tourists and bring in an income for the council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hutton. Offers of advice is actually you can serve on planning committee and on this committee. And there's another conflict of interest. I see Councillor Hugo was very interested in that. Why those two members who are usually on the committee are not on the committee this afternoon?
I was advised you couldn't.
Well, I've got it from the officers with me that you can. Okay, and Councillor Walsh, I think you wanted to speak. Would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm quite perplexed at what Councillor Hutton has said in regards to a lot of that information. If I can, Chair, I've only been elected for the last year. I've sat on a number of scrutiny meetings, and I was elected councillor that's to represent Squires Gate and Blackpool as a whole. I've sat on scrutiny meetings in relationship to flooding. They weren't specific issues for specific planning applications. They were for areas such as Bispam, Anchorzone, Cleveley's. So the point is, these issues were never discussed because they weren't allowed to be discussed. The current administration would not accept the petition as signed by the people of Blackpool, a certain number of people. We have to reach 1,500, we submit that to the council. The Labour administration rejected that petition. So at what stage are we supposed to talk about flooding? At what stage are we supposed to talk about the green canopy? If you will not allow the elected members to speak, when can the people of Blackpool speak in opposition? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Walsh. Okay, who else would like to contribute to the debate? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just sort of taking it back to the core process of this calling. My concern is, as I referenced earlier, really is the process, and I think we've restricted what we can do because of, as Jane, Councillor Hugo identified, because of the way that we've done it. It means we therefore can't have the core debate that we all want to have, which is what could we do with this land that could do all the things that Councillor Hutton has suggested we can do to get more people in there, that Councillor Walsh has suggested, in terms of the discussion about the green canopy and the environmental use and so on. It's a conversation we should be having, and unfortunately, because of the way it's been done, we can't do. And that's, I guess, part of the concern that we have is the process. And when we start to look at this more as a process, it is a concern, because as soon as it leaves this domain, if the committee approve it tonight, or if it eventually gets approved and it goes to planning, straight away we're working towards confining ourselves to one particular use of that land by one particular business, and that ultimately is a concern, which is why I would like to see it, and I propose tonight that it does go to full council for all members to have the opportunity to have this conversation, to at very least have the discussion that we can then send that back to the executive to reconsider and do it the alternative way, which is what should we do with the land that maximises its value for all the things that we need to do, referencing the green and blue, the priority 2, and give the option therefore, and the executive, a clear instruction with all the members involved, of all parties, of all opinions within all of those parties, the opportunity to have their say and get best value for the land and for the people of this town. And that's something that why I'm really keen that we can do that. We can still rescue ourselves from this position and allow the executive to come up with the best decision that works for everyone.
Thank you very much, Councillor Galley. Councillor Hunter, would you like to speak?
Yes, very briefly, Chair. Thank you. Councillor Galley, of whom I have the greatest respect, has made a point there as to when will we be allowed to have the discussion as to what use this particular land can be put to. But I would throw that question back and say that prior to the present situation, prior to the present proposals and the decision of the executive, I didn't hear anyone suggesting anything about that particular area. You know, I didn't hear any arguments coming forward. What should we do with it? Should we do this with it? Should we do that with it? It's only once this particular process has been started that now people are saying, well, everyone should be involved in the debate as to what should happen with it. We've had the consultation process, as outlined by Councillor Hutton. It's been full and open. The matter has been before the council via a petition. And as Councillor Hutton rightly points out, ultimately it's for HIP, Homes Investment Properties, to come up with proposals which may be to the satisfaction of the Planning Committee or may not be to the satisfaction of the Planning Committee. If they're not to the satisfaction of the Planning Committee, then at some point HIP will no doubt surrender the land, and if, as and when that occurs, if it occurs, I think then we could have the debate that Councillor Galley suggests. But as for now, to me, the whole process has been open and transparent. It wasn't curtailed by the lockdown, because as Councillor Hugo rightly points out, it was the evening of the 23rd of March when the Prime Minister announced the lockdown. Up to that point, it was pure speculation as to whether there would be one or there wouldn't be one. And I think the majority opinion was that there wouldn't be one at that point, and it took off people by surprise. So really, I would say, I don't know whether Councillor Galley has already put a formal proposal in, but I would make the formal proposal that this scrutiny committee takes no action.
Thank you,
Chair,
Councillor.
can I
no, sorry.
that motion, please? I
sorry,
want to second the motion.
You can second something. You can't speak again. You want to second Councillor Hunter's?
I want to second that motion that Councillor Hunter's just put forward, that we do nothing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hutton. Yeah, just to clear things up, Councillor Galley did propose something, but the first motion proposed and seconded is the motion by Councillor Hunter, which has now been seconded by Councillor Hutton. I'm just conversing with the officers here. My suggested approach is that we take the substantive proposal from Councillor Hunter, which has been seconded. Should that fall, we may take Councillor Galley's motion. We haven't finished the debate yet. There are still people who may want
surely,
to...
Chair, as I was the first proposer, my motion should be considered first.
I got in first.
No, I did.
No, it hadn't been seconded.
Yeah, but that was because no one had the chance.
I'm with the officers here.
Sorry, Chair.
No, I mean, it's important. One of the officers is just consulting the digital version of the Black Book, and we'll try and be fair to everybody as possible. Councillor Hugo, are you wishing to say something that might illuminate the meeting? Would Councillor Hugo like
Sorry,
to...
yeah, I just needed to unmute. I just wondered if I might make a comment while that's being sorted out.
I'm only going to allow one speech from each person. Is this your speech now? Would you like to make it?
If that's okay, yes, please.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you. It was just to lead on really from Councillor Galley referencing my comment, and I guess I'll pinch from Mr. Alan Cavill as well, where he said before it's chicken and egg, and it depends which way you look at it. Your Councillor Galley is concerned about the process leading on from my questions. However, I feel satisfied about the process leading on from my questions. And again, it's chicken and egg. I feel satisfied that this matter will come before the planning committee, and that's the appropriate process in this particular instance. And that's where everything will be under a microscope. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think the issue, Chair, is it wasn't necessarily clear if Councillor Galley was making a proposal. If he was, we should have gone immediately to whether it was being seconded on, as it says in the Constitution, when seconding, unless a notice of motion has been... I keep reading the wrong thing. I just did the right thing in front of me. I do apologise. No speeches may be made after the mover has moved a proposal and explained the purpose of it until the motion has been seconded. And obviously there was no immediate seconding if Councillor Galley did or did not make a proposal, which I think is the issue.
Well, the best way to right a wrong then, Sharon, is to correct it straight away. So if someone's willing to second my proposal,
I'm not sure. I would like to hear all the speeches. I think that's only fair, and then have any proposing and seconding done at the end. I possibly should have been a little bit firmer earlier on. Can I ask if anybody else who has not spoken would like to speak? I see Councillor Gary Coleman has his hand up.
Thanks, Chair. It's not a long speech. It's just a few little comments. There's over 8,000 people out there that took the trouble to get involved in democracy and actually took the time to sign the petition. And probably what they witnessed, it's no wonder people out there... I struggle to get people involved in politics and to get them interested in politics, and then they see this sort of process, and it surely makes them question why they get involved, because I refer back to when the petition came to council. I know the general feeling, the general consensus was nobody's listened to us. The process was just going to go ahead anyway. We've done all this, we've taken all the time, we've done hours and hours and hours of effort by the people's. Yes, we've heard you. So we could come to planning. The planning committee could turf it out and say, no, we don't like it. And then that can be appealed. And we've lost all control over it then. And the appeal can, as you know, we lose some appeals, we win some appeals. But it's out of our hands. And I just feel that so many people are disillusioned with this. They've took the trouble to get involved in the process. And anyway, I've no further comments, Chair, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coleman. I see Councillor Paul Bodess has indicated. Councillor Bodess.
Yes, Chair. I am satisfied, as Councillor Hugo said, that the process has been followed, and I'm feeling a little confused with Councillor Williams himself, because he said that it's been on the council agenda for some time to dispose of the golf course. So I'm just a bit confused where the issue is. So I don't know if Councillor Williams can explain that, or
You can't answer
if
questions at this
anybody else
stage.
feels that way. But I do just feel that it was always, whatever administration it was, there would always be this question of what are we going to do with it? So it just seems pretty pointless going over and over the same ground. Now we have taken action and we're looking at what can we do with it. That's my view.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Burdess. Do you have any other speeches from anybody? Okay, in that case, it really is the time for anything to be proposed. And Councillor Galley has his hand up there.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose that it is forwarded across to full council to consider.
Councillor Hutton has his hand up also.
Chair, on a procedural note, we've already got on the table, proposed by Councillor Hunter and seconded by me, a proposal to do nothing.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, but the procedure is that that motion should go first. I'm sorry for Councillor Galley, but Councillor Hunter proposed it and I then immediately seconded it, which is the correct procedure.
Well,
therefore, that should be the one that is voted on first.
I received officer advice in that after Councillor Galley made the proposal originally, I then should have asked for a seconder. I didn't do that. So thus it could be argued that the lack of a search for a seconder in some way handicapped Councillor Galley. I also take Councillor Hutton's point.
I think the issue is that I don't think it was necessarily clear that Councillor Galley had officially made a proposal for a motion. That's the issue for me.
Okay.
So for me, the first proposal was from Councillor Hunter.
I'll accept the officer advice and I'll confirm with Councillor Hutton that he doesn't indeed wish to second the motion from Councillor Hunter. That's correct, isn't it, Councillor Hutton?
That's what I've already done. I've seconded and I did it correctly. I seconded it as soon as it was proposed, before there were any other debates. So I'd like that to be the first motion to be discussed.
That's the formal proposal that we take no action. Okay, we'll take a show of hands. Those for the motion.
1, 2, 3, 4 for that motion. Are you voting, Chair? Okay, so we've got four for that motion.
Okay, thank you very much. And those against?
So that's 4 against.
All right. Well, uncharted territory, perhaps. Are there any other motions?
As you are the Chair, you have the casting vote on the motion, Councillor.
Yes, I realise that. I'm going to abstain for the time being, and I'm going to ask if there are any other motions to be heard.
Sorry, Chairman. I believe we have to resolve the motion either for or against. We can't sort of leave it on the table.
If you'll just bear with, we can take a slight adjournment on that. Is that okay?
Yes, a slight adjournment to check the procedure.
Hi everyone. Whilst we're waiting for that, I have good news of my own. I finally found a barber that's going to take care of this.
Gally,
Oh,
I
sorry.
believe we're back on now. Apologies for that delay. We've just been referring to the Constitution to make sure we give the right advice. The outcome is that we do need a resolution to this motion. So we have 4 votes for, 4 votes against. The chairman can either use his casting vote to make the determination, or we need to keep debating until we get a resolution.
I've considered all the issues very carefully. I've been impressed by both lines of debate. It is, again, a very, very difficult decision for me. On balance, considering the importance of this issue, I'm not convinced that the executive considered all the relevant arguments at the executive stage. I think due to the importance of this matter, it would be appropriate to involve all councillors. We are, after all councillors, all equal participants. If this is referred to full council, it will enable full consideration of all the issues. And I vote against the motion put forward by Councillor Hunter. So the motion falls 5-4. Okay, and Councillor Galley has his hand up. I suspect he would like to propose something.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like to propose that we refer the decision to full council.
Is there a second that Councillor Walsh has his hand up there?
I would like to second Councillor Galley's motion, please. Decision.
Okay, well, without further ado, we'll take the vote. Okay, those for Councillor Galley's motion.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And those against.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4. So the motion is carried.
Okay, just check with my advisor here. Do you need anything else from this meeting?
You just need to determine with which words you'd like to send that back to council with.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. I've already said, and I think it's been agreed by the majority of members, that they're not convinced that the executive considered all the relevant factors. Is that agreeable to you? I'm getting some nodding there. I think it's also been agreed that because of the importance of this matter, it's appropriate for all councillors to take part in a full meeting on this. That way, every ward is represented, every part of the borough is represented, and we will get the maximum amount of public participation. Would anybody else like to add anything to that? Councillor Galley.
If I may, Chair, as well, I applaud your bravery and so on. That couldn't have been an easy decision, and I actually really felt for you there. And I would say to anyone on the executive who watches this broadcast to say that this is an opportunity for all members of all parties and all flavours within those parties to have a real honest discussion and don't they shouldn't take this as a criticism. It isn't a criticism of the executive. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to all work together to come up with something that works for the town, and you should be applauded, as should all the members who've contributed to this debate tonight.
Well, I'm embarrassed. Let's move on. I was actually looking for any additional reasons, any additional wording that we might want to send to the council. Councillor Walsh.
Sorry, Chair, I probably would just embarrass you a little bit more because I want to just say thank you as well. I know it's something you know it can't be easy. As I said earlier, as a ward, an elected member for Squires Gate, it's for the people of every ward, Leighton, Anchorzone, Bispam, all of the wards, to get involved and speak about this. It's such a big issue. It's such a big piece of land. It's part of our heritage. Let's all get involved in the debate from all sides. Forget political colours. And I thank you for giving the elected members, all 42 of us, the chance to do that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hutton would like to say something.
Yeah, I just think that this whole meeting has been a waste of time.
Well, sorry, that wasn't what I was looking for.
Can I finish?
No, I'm afraid not. No, I have said to the other members. Can I finish
with what I've got to say, please? You've allowed other people to speak. Now I'd like to say something.
We're on the form of words that are to be sent to the council. That's what we're to discuss.
Well, that's not what other people have been saying.
I know, and I did point that
Right,
out to
you allowed them to
members that the
speak,
words.
and now you're saying I can't.
I'm sorry, Councillor Hutton. The only purpose of continuing the meeting is to find words to address to the Councillor. And I do believe we've exhausted this stage. As without further ado, I'd like to thank you all very much for your genuine participation in the meeting, both officers and councillors. And I will now formally end the meeting. Thank you very much indeed.